Alright guys, welcome back to another episode of Assemble. My name's High Ruler, and today we're going over the Klaue Company. Now, this news broke a few hours ago. They posted the blog, so obviously I'm a few hours late. So once again, sorry about that, guys. And, obviously my sleep schedule doesn't help me in this regard at all. But, with that being said, let's get into the actual news. Let's see what all these enemies are about. And let's see if it's worth something. I've seen a lot of conversation come up about the status effects and kind of the overall kind of conversation about gear that once again is kicking off. But I don't know where to stand unless I read this. So let's get through this and I'll get my thoughts at the end. All right. So with that being said, let's get right into the blog. All right. So I'm going to start off in the second paragraph here. So Matt says, when we began designing this faction of enemies, we knew that we wanted to work in two new status effects that we're introducing with Wakanda, that being Sonic and Vibranium. In an effort to make the new Sonic Vibranium gear more unique and meaningful, we decided to incorporate weaknesses to these new status effects across the roster. Okay. As you encounter the Klaue Company mercs, you'll find that some of them are corrupted Vibranium themed and others are Sonic themed. In this post, I'll give an example of one of each, starting with the Bruiser. So this is the Bruiser. So we're going to unfull screen this. We're going to look, and then we're going to blow this up. Okay, looks kind of cool. I like the hammer there. Like I guess, an axe, I guess. Maybe that's probably better. The axe, I like the design there too. Okay, very cool looking. I will say very cool looking. All right, so the Bruiser is a large axe-wielding brute that hits hard with relentless attacks. Like all corrupted Vibranium mercs, he can become overcharged with unstable corrupted Vibranium energy if he lands a certain number of successful hits. Overcharge. Okay, I'm guessing that's new. That's going to be new with these. Okay, oh, here we go. So this is what the overcharge state looks like. That's actually cool. That looks cool. I don't like how these images are like not high definition. What is going on? That's very cool looking. Okay, so let's read more. When an enemy is overcharged, they take reduced damage and hit reactions are downgraded, but not ignored like with overshields. Interesting. The overcharged state also unlocks special attacks for these enemies that they otherwise can't perform. Once an enemy is overcharged, they'll stay that way until they're defeated. Unless you have Sonic gear, Sonic attacks will bypass the damage, dampening properties of overcharge, and trigger the Sonic status effects that will dispel the overcharged state. Okay, hold on. There's a little bit there that you got to break down, okay? So, let's go with, obviously, Overcharge, I think, is a better version of Overshields, right? I think a lot of the conversation around the OLT has been Overshields suck. I would agree. So, Overcharge, for me, is a step in the right direction away from Overshields. Good move there. Now, let's go with this. The Overcharge state also unlocks special attacks for these enemies that they otherwise can't perform. That's cool. Yeah, go for that. Once an enemy is overcharged, they'll stay that way until they're defeated. Okay, unless you have Sonic gear, Sonic attacks will bypass the damage dampening properties of overcharge and trigger this. I mean, okay, so like they're like, okay, so what they're doing is they're giving you a problem and then giving you the solution in the new gear. Okay, I mean, I see what they're doing with that. Once again, they're trying to kind of incentivize using these new status effects. Okay, interesting. Okay, now we have the Strategist. Okay, let's open this picture up. Okay, I mean, like, looks pretty cool. What is the background here, though? I'm more interested in the background here. Where is this? Oh, interesting. Okay, all right. But the strategists themselves looks pretty cool. All right, next up we have the Strategist. The support enemy who commands small disc-like drones around the battlefield to buff other Klaue Company mercs and debuff heroes. Interesting. These drones will orbit around their targets and can be shot down with ranged attacks. The Strategist prefers to stick to the sidelines, but they do have some attacks at their disposal. However, they need their drones to perform them, so if all drones are currently deployed or destroyed, their only defense will be the Sonic Aura. Interesting. Okay, this looks kind of cool. Obviously, it's very pixelated, but it looks kind of cool. All right, cool. The Sonic Aura is an ability that our Sonic-themed mercenaries can use when they feel threatened. While active, it behaves like a shield that would deflect projectiles and block melee attacks and then fire off a reactive Sonic Wave attack in response. It can only stay active for a short period of time and then has a long cooldown period. However, if you have Vibranium gear, that you can use attacks with Vibranium status on them to bypass the aura and even dispel it if you trigger the Vibranium status effects on them. Okay, what they showed today was pretty cool, right? The enemies are pretty cool, the designs are pretty cool, the strategist with the drones, that's very cool. I like what they're doing with the enemies themselves, right? And I think most people would agree that having new enemies that aren't robots is probably a net benefit for the game, right? I think most people could agree on that. I think when you look at kind of the higher tier of players, and this isn't to kind of like demean anyone if you're not there, because even if you're not a high tier player, maybe you do have some feelings on gear. But a lot of the time, we're starting to see some of these players kind of speak up about the state of gear within the game. Not just the state of gear, but, you break it down into the perks and the status effects, right? And it's like, you have the battery effect, you have perks that stack damage. And Stardust and I got into this on the weekly recap to a small degree, but maybe not to the point where we could fully flesh out a lot of the issues there. But, maybe we already did. But I think to the point of that, you look at something like the Sonic and Vibranium status effects, and I think they're cool. I think when you look at what they're trying to do here, they're trying to kind of, mix up play styles in that regard, right? Like they're trying to give you something new, something fresh. And to that point, I think it's cool. I want to get my hands on them. I want to see how different they are compared to a lot of the status effects that we're getting. I want to see what kind of difference it makes if you have Sonic or Vibranium themed gear versus any other status effect, and kind of the like what happens with these enemies, right? Is it something that's very needed? Is it something that's not very needed? I think playtesting is going to be very important to these status effects as a whole. So I'm not ready to write them off. And I think honestly, I think at this point, I'm open to trying them out, right? Like I'm open to kind of like looking at all this and seeing if it's okay to play as, right? Now, what's going to be really interesting is if there's any new perks that are attached to these items, right? If there's new gear and new status effects and new perks attached to them, that's where we're starting to see a lot of the gears start to move, right? And I think that's where you're going to have to wonder and see, like, are they kind of expanding gear to more different styles of perks, or are they trying to do something different? But I think a lot of the time it's going to be similar to what we saw with the OLT, for example, which is like, I have all of this, which is really good, and you're offering me this, which isn't as good. So why do I use it, right? In similar vein, maybe that might be the conversation surrounding Vibranium and Sonic status effects. And to be fair, that's a fair point, right? We look at a lot of what they're trying to do with Sonic and Vibranium status effects, and a lot of it has to do with the Wakandan enemies, right? So with loadouts, maybe it's like you equipped your Sonic and Vibranium gear that basically, you have all your same perks on them pretty much. You can have your damage buff, you can have your Tachyon Surge, but the only thing that changes is basically the status effects on them, right? But then you have like your other gear, which has your other status effects that work well outside of the Wakandan biome, right? Maybe that's what they're trying to go for. It's interesting, but I mean, like, once again, I think the overall problem with gear a lot of the time is that we have kind of the best stuff that they could offer, and it's really hard to kind of get away from that at this point. You know what I mean? So once again, I really am kind of excited to get my hands on it. I don't know if these things are going to be worthwhile to kind of use all the time. Maybe they're going to have very specific purposes. And as we saw with the OLT stuff, people have used it, but once again, it's kind of not addressing the core issues of what gear is right now. And I think that's kind of where people are starting to wonder, you can introduce cool things and give people cool play styles, right? But when you have a meta that's so set in on, 3 perks, and, you can mess around with the battery effect, now you're giving kind of like status effects that don't do battery as far as we know, right? All right, guys, just a little editor's note here. Now, obviously, there's probably a good chance these do the status battery effect, right? But I think it bears mention because, like, they are very selective perks that only really work in Wakanda. So it's really driving home the point that, like, we don't really know the full scale of these status effects. And I think it bears question, like, what is the full scale implementation of these going to look like? So just a little editor's note, guys, and we don't know what kind of perks you're going to offer on top of this gear. People are probably going to wonder, what is the incentive to grind a lot of this stuff? And that's a totally fair question. And I think we're going to have to wait till Tuesday to find out if those fears are validated, or if it's more of the same. At the end of the day, I think a lot of what gear is going to be in Wakanda is like, you're going to have Vibranium and Sonic gear, right? And then you're either going to have some perks that are brand new and maybe you can mess around with some of them, or you're going to have some of the same perks that you already have just attached to new Wakandan gear, and you're going to have kind of the same issues that we have right now. And I think that's kind of where we're at. Not to say I'm not excited, to try the Sonic and Vibranium gear, but I think in a lot of the conversations surrounding gear right now, that's where we're at right now. So, I mean, it is what it is, right? At the end of the day, this wasn't a kind of like a gear blog, but I think, kind of showing a lot of this stuff and kind of talking about a little bit of this stuff really opens that door to the conversation that a lot of people are having. And that's totally fine. That's totally fine. For me, I'm just excited to get my hands on it, play test it, go through it, and see exactly what we got to offer. It's hard to say until we have the full range of information, and just right now we don't have that full range of information, right? So with that being said, guys, that was the blog covering two new enemies, two new status types, and some of the abilities that these enemies are going to have. So with that being said, guys, thank you so much for checking out the channel. I will see you guys next time here on Assemble. Enjoy the rest of your day. Peace.